All right, guys, welcome back to the Masterclass, Smallmouth Masterclass sessions. Hope everybody's doing great. Hope everybody's out there catching some fish. We got some rain moving through the region, so why not do another Masterclass session in the companion videos to the newsletter. If you haven't subscribed to the free newsletter, smallmoutharmy.substack.com. Make sure you do that. A lot more stuff is dropping in there. And we'll give some updates on some guided trips and all that stuff here later on in the year. It's going to be awesome stuff. And I hope everybody so far, everyone, positive feedback so far. So I really appreciate everybody on Substack and now on YouTube who are taking the time out of their day to listen to this in the truck or in podcast form or kind of going along with the newsletter series companions to this. So pretty cool. So today we're going to talk about crankbaits and the continuation of the crankbaits seminar. We're going to talk about noise and signal today and why, if you don't understand what is happening in the water column with your crankbait or any kind of bait that is utilizing noise and signal, okay, it doesn't have to be a crankbait, all right? Anything can have a rattle, anything can have whatever, jig heads, things like that, okay? So it applies to those things too. But we're really talking about what happens, why we're choosing the crankbaits that we're choosing, when we're choosing them. I'll do a separate breakdown on the crankbaits. Make sure you check out, it'll drop, will be a lipless crankbait masterclass solely on the lipless for spring because that is a predominant player in spring for both largemouth and smallmouth is the lipless crankbait. For those of you that are unfamiliar with the lipless crankbait, it comes in various variations, right? But the dominant aspect of it is obviously there's no bill, okay? And so that's how you get the lipless designation. And so we'll cover that kind of separately. We're going to talk about that a little bit today. Just in terms of the noise and the rattles in those specific baits. But we'll get into actually presentation and how to fish the lipless, how to hop the lipless, how to burn the lipless, all that kind of stuff in a companion to the crankbait sessions. Okay, so what is the difference between signal and noise? Okay, and the predominant things that we talk about when we talk about how do we signal fish and how do we use noise to attract fish, right? Remember, the first reaction of a bass, whether it be a reaction strike, okay, or whether it be a draw, is going to be the signal in the water column. If the bait's not in the water column, you're not going to get bit, right? So in the water column, as soon as that crankbait hits and you begin your cadence, it is signaling. What is that signal going to be? That signal is going to be dependent upon the internal components of that crankbait, right? And they're all very, very different, okay? So in the context of the water column, the difference between signal and noise, it refers to how the sound and vibration either attract a bass from a distance or allow it to precisely target the bass. For example, murky water. Which of these noises and signals do we want to use in murky water versus clear water, right? Okay, because there are primary differences in that. Remember, in clear water, a bass has a full view in clear water of that presentation, and it had better be natural. If it's not, they're going to peel away, okay, because they can see it for a further distance, okay? Even if that signal's going to draw their attention, as they get up to it, they're going to make that determination. Is that a meal or is that a threat, or does something not seem right about the action of that particular bait, right? And again, in the other, if you can go on the newsletter and you can see a breakdown between the Megabass 2.0, Big M 2.0, and the Big M 4.0, and why they are so different, because it is so much more than just the length of the bait. It's also the variation of the lip and whether it will roll over structure or bounce off structure, right? Everything is different, even though they're the same bait in different sizes. Their action's different, their sound is different, their signal is different because of the size of the bait in the water column. It's all science, okay? So the distinction is primarily driven by the internal components, like I talked about, inside the actual bait. Whether it's a knocker, a disc knocker, a flat knocker, a round knocker, a bigger, just like ball bearing, okay, can become a knocker, whereas the small variation can become a rattle, okay? And so there are differences amongst the whole gambit, all right, of crankbaits in terms of that kind of signal and attraction. I'm going to pull this up so you guys can get, so I can give you right from the newsletter what we've got going on here. So we're going to talk primarily driven by the internal components, specifically the BB rattles, BB guns. When we're kids, we know what a BB looks like, right? Primarily that is the dominant one for rattles, okay? Depending on the size and depending upon the size of the chamber, okay? The size of the chamber is actually a bigger component in the actual signal and noise than the BB itself, okay? Because you can have the same BB in two different size chambers, and the number of BBs is going to change the sound, okay? A tighter chamber is going to be it's going to be more of a like like, okay, a lower, like, I want to say a lower velocity or octave, kind of like in the water column. Then a bigger chamber where that rattle is moving, it's going to be more like it's going to be a lot more. So the signal's different, okay? And we're going to show some demonstrations here, some different popular baits and some custom baits. So really the physics of noise. That's what it really is. It's the science and the physics of noise, okay? BBs are intended to generate noise, okay? Like a lot of noise, distraction, cause you to get your attention, okay? I liken the rattles, like I've said before, to the fire truck or the ambulance going down a mile away from you. You can just hear it, and then all of a sudden, as it gets closer to you and closer to you, that signal gets louder and louder and louder. That siren is the signal, okay? It gets louder and louder as it gets closer to you, okay? Same applies to bass. Closer they get to that knocker or that rattle, the more intense that signal is. But how far in the water column will that knocker or that rattle get the attention of a smallmouth bass to draw it, right? Or a swim bait, for example, a larger size swim bait, all right? Physics of noise. Those lures contain the multiple small beads that produce high-pitched, loud, clacking sounds or cracking sounds, okay, depending on, okay, the style of the chamber and, of course, the rattle. Strategic purpose, the high-frequency noise is intended to reach out and pull fish or draw fish from greater distances, especially in the spring, okay, when they're already beginning to feed up, okay? Come out of their winter holes, they're transition, pre-spawn, they're feeding, they want to feed up for the spawn, and then the same thing happens again post-spawn. After a little bit of a recovery period, then they start feeding up again, okay? And so knowing where to find them, knowing where they should be in your river system is number one. And then once you've narrowed the area of where they should be, pre-spawn or post-spawn, that's where you hit those areas. And you may not be able to locate them in your water column without, like, say, a graph or electronics, but then you'll use your search baits. And then the search baits, you want to be loud, okay? You want them to be loud and whatever because you want to find out, you want to locate them, okay, first. And then, of course, you can switch to other baits if you want. Highly effective when searching vast areas, like I just covered, to find attractive schools of fish or, again, locating those, especially in murky water, okay, where visibility is very, very limited, okay? Let's talk a little bit about them. One knockers, right? Traditional one-knot crankbaits, okay? The majority of your crankbaits on the market are one-knocker crankbaits. That's the standard. Now, the knocker, again, may be a different size and deliver a different pitch, okay? But let's face it, we don't get to open our packages at the retail store to find out. We could sit there with the packaging and try to shake it to try and find out, oh, it's a knocker. But we really don't get to dial that in until we get on the water. And we actually can put it next to our ear. We actually can hear it. But fundamentally, most of the knockers tend to be the same knocker, but the chamber is what's been designed different. So the noise is different, okay? Sometimes you'll hear these referred to as disc knockers as well because of the shape of the actual knocker. It's more like a disc than a ball. There's ball knockers and there's discs. They're kind of like a frisbee kind of like thing. Okay? The physics of the signal: instead of multiple beads, knockers use a single larger weight, often tungsten, okay, that creates a deep, low-frequency thump or thud. Tungsten will do that. Problem is, tungsten's getting very, very hard to source. So we're probably going to find a transition back to previous style knockers than in the tungsten craze, because tungsten's becoming very, very expensive. Honing through chaos, right? That's what you're really creating in the spring, is chaos. Okay, that's what a lipless crankbait does. It creates chaos for fish that are feeding up. Sort of like the jerkbait, okay, during different times of the year, the topwater, right? In environments with a lot of underwater activity, chaos, okay, is what you want, such as schools of flickering bait, wind-driven waves, boat traffic, okay, that kind of stuff that's disturbing the underwater turbidity, okay, of wherever you are, lake or a big high-pressured lake like a Smith Mountain Lake, where there's party boats going in and out all summer long, right? That changes the underwater water column, okay? High-pitched rattles can become part of background noise, okay? So the rattle has a different frequency, right? Let's check out this lipless crankbait right here, okay? Right? That's a different frequency, okay? That is a different frequency in that particular lipless than, say, this awesome crankbait right here. It's a knocker with two rattles. Different frequency, right? So the draw is different, okay? So you want to think about that. The steady, methodical thumping of a one knocker, okay? Knocker and rattle, okay? Knocker. Smaller knocker and a pop, okay? And a Pop X style bait, right? How about a bigger knocker? Hear the difference? Bigger size bait, it's got a bigger knocker in it, totally different noise, okay? This is an old school, the old knockers, old school Excalibur, okay? Totally different. That thing's probably 15, 20 years old, all right? Lateral line tracking. What's lateral line tracking? We'll cover that more in the newsletter, but lateral line tracking is basically the signal. The signal signals the lateral line, okay? Most people think it's the eyes. It's not. It's the lateral line. The lateral line is how they navigate structure, danger, everything, as they feel the vibration of things in the water column off their lateral line, okay? Because of the sound is rhythmic and predictable, fish uses a lateral line to track the vibration. So that lateral line is helping them, guide them to that vibration, to that noise in the water column. This allows bass to position itself correctly for a strike, even in stained water, right? How does that bass, it's not solely visual, okay? What happens if you're watching, if you can see it sometimes in clear water, when you've got you're in that strike zone and you can see it, or maybe you're using forward-facing sonar and you twitch that bait, what happens to that fish? They immediately move. It's not necessarily because they can see it. We've seen it where bass that are moving away from a bait, when you twitch hard, will move again because it comes off their lateral line. It's not necessarily visual, okay? And especially in murky water, it's almost entirely lateral line. Okay. All right, let's talk about the environmental physics really quick. Noise, rattles, and one knockers. Okay. So your primary goal is to pull fish from a distance with your rattles. Okay. Springtime, you're trying to locate prime search bait. Okay. Think about this. Old school bait. Okay. I want to do a little mix of some old school and some mega bass and some custom. Let's look at this. One of the loudest frequencies when you scale it in terms of frequency. One of the loudest baits out there. Okay, it's packed full of rattles in a smaller chamber. Okay, that's some serious freaking frequency, right? Okay, old school baits, man. Okay, they weren't trying to cut corners back then. He stacked all the baits in there. High pitch, chaotic clacking is a sound profile. Murky water. They're going to pick that signal up in murky water and track it down. Okay, they hear it long before they see it. Hear it before you see it. Okay, you know, it's sort of like they say in sports: see it before you do it. Right? Okay. Well, they hear it before they see it. Chuck and wind, burning to cover. Pretty good. You know, pretty much just burn lipless crankbaits or hop lipless crankbaits is pretty much your technique. Your single knocker, okay, helps fish hone in and connect with the bait. Deep, low frequency thump. So lower frequency. Provides a tractable signal through background noise, okay? All right? So think about it. There's a bunch of activity going on. There's a lot of stuff in the water column. Maybe there's boat traffic. All that. This is one's at a lower frequency that they can actually pick up better than rattles. Rattle kind of gets muted with everything else in there over those long distances. So if there's no activity, if you're the only one out on the water, you're the only one on the river, there's no kayaks, there's no canoes, there's no jet boats, there's no bass boats, there's nothing. It's just you and the river and the fish, well then, okay, because there's not a lot of other noise going on. But when you go to a heavy pressured lake or reservoir, okay, the rattle is not going to, transmit as far because it's going to get diluted because of all of the other noise that's happening, especially on top of the water on the weekends with everything slamming. Could be anything kind of that. Wind. Could be currents, seam noise, all that stuff for smallmouth comes into play. Okay, so you're looking at you're providing that trackable signal, and then to maintain a rhythmic, predictable thump. It's like these things are like when you like our heartbeats, like at the doctor's office they put us on the thing and we just kind of see it go boop, boop. It's like a signal. Okay, that registers everything. They can register. How do they catch the bait, right? Comes off their lateral line. They somehow, as predatory species, figure out how fast that bait is moving away from them, and based on the signal. And that's when they increase their speed. Okay, that's when they can increase their speed to catch up, right? Because they're getting the signal off of their lateral lines. So ultimately, BB rattles are used to locate fish by drawing them in, and one knockers are used to trigger connections. Okay, so like you found an area, you're catching fish, you then can switch to the knocker to get some trigger bites. Basically, 2 or 3 in your cadence of your cranks, and you're going to get bit, right? All right, let's break that down, the water column physics, okay? Signal and noise, all right? Underwater bass interpret their environment through a combination of hearing and feeling vibrations, right? Via their lateral lines, like we've discussed. In physics of a water column, a choice between an internal BB rattle, okay? Difference, has a little knocker and a rattle, versus just the rattle, okay? And one knockers represent strategic shift between creating noise to attract the attention from a distance and providing signal that allows a fish to pinpoint the target. Okay, let's talk about physics of attraction. High frequency sound is designed to be ultra loud, effectively expanding the area in an angler's fishing. You're covering a lot of area and you're trying to locate. Physics dictates that these high pitched sounds travel well to pull fish from greater distances. That's why the lipless is so effective in the spring, because the bass still tend to be spread out. Coming out of their water, they may be roaming and they're feeding, but they're spread out. They're not consolidated, okay? Like they are necessarily during the spawn with a bunch of beds and all the bass are around. They're guarding or they're doing spawn, whatever. They're kind of like concentrated, right? Well, when they're roaming, they're spread out, okay? Oftentimes, they could be spread out along a ledge, a flat, wherever they could be, either pre or post spawn. They're staging, okay? They can get caught up in their staging. When they're staging up, suspended in staging, that's when you tend to you want to go with a knocker. When they're spread out and you want to like locate, that's when you want to kind of go with the rattle, okay? BB rattles are more effective for murky water during the spring, especially after spring storms like I'm having right now. The water is going to turn, they're going to muddy up a little bit, especially shallow. And then I'm going to run with, let's look at top waters, okay? Because we want to hit that. What's kind of the difference in some of our top water baits, okay? Okay, murky water, more of a different frequency, but not just a rattle. It's also got the thump, okay? Now let's look at like a Pop Max, okay? Pop Max style, okay? What's that sound for like a Megabass Pop Max? I'll pull another one up. Hear that? So you're getting off the front, you're getting two noises. You're getting a design noise, okay, from the internal component of the knocker and the chamber. You're also getting a design noise based on the formation of the bait itself in the water. So it's two noises, okay? So you kind of get the best of both worlds. That's why the Pop Max is so successful. Okay, awesome sig pattern right here. This is a KO. This is a Pop Max KO. Beautiful bait. Hard turn fishing. Hard turn fishing. Okay. Now let's look at a Pop Max. Okay. Let's go with a Megabass Pop Max. Okay. See that right there in the bottom? You'll know those signal ones. Ita's always got them on the bottom. Let's look at the difference in this one. See the difference? Okay, a KO doesn't necessarily have the same internal components as a Pop Max. Okay, but it's a Pop Max KO. Listen again. Here. Difference. Okay, just always keep that in mind. All right, so they may look the same. Okay, but the sounds may be slightly different. Okay, so just keep that in mind. Again, this is a Pop Max. This is a Pop Max Midnight Emerald Irachi. Okay, from Pop Max, from Megabass. It's a pretty killer bait. All right. Well, let's look at another one. Let's look at surface, right? Top water. Okay, another one. You can see the internal components of this bait. See the rattle down here? Which is a knocker. See that knocker in the tail? So what do you think that's going to sound like in the water column? Let's go. Look at that. The two little rattle and the knocker in the tail. Okay? A little different sound again. So these are different frequencies. It's a killer bait. Look at that. But you could just see that in the tail, right? See that moving on? See how small the chamber is? It's about an inch chamber. But that knocker is bigger. So you're getting it. Why oftentimes, ask yourselves this if you ever experienced this when you're working with spooks or any kind of top water. Why oftentimes is it this hook that seems to stay in their mouth? Because that's where the knocker is. Because of the signal and the noise, that's what they're drawing at, and they hit it right there. Okay? Just keep that in mind. As opposed to a rattle, okay, which is different. All right? So a one knocker utilizes a single large weight, often again, like I said, tungsten, freedom movement throughout the entire lure or just the chamber like I just showed. Okay, instead of a high-pitched clack or a one knocker produces deep, low-frequency thumps and thuds. Okay, that's what's happening. All right, let me go to the rattle, the BB rattles. Okay, here's a Tiger crankbait. Okay, awesome little crankbait. Greg's Blue Crab, I think, is the pattern. Okay, listen to the sound variation of this bait. Hear that? That's a lot of rattles at work. That's going to draw a lot. Okay, so let's pull that up, and let's pull this one, which is very similar to a Jackal, the TN Jackal line, 50s and 70s. Okay, knocker, rattle, knocker, rattle, different frequencies. Okay, all of these Megabass S crank, rattle and a knocker in the front, knocker here, knocker towards the front chamber, rattles in the back. I'm going to bring this away from you. I'm going to keep the same rhythm. See what happens. Closer I got to you, the louder that thing got, right? Okay, let's talk about jerk baits. We're going to throw jerk baits in here. Not a crankbait, but a jerk bait because I want to show you the difference. This is a spawn killer, a 110 plus 1 spawn killer by Megabass. Okay, 110 plus 1. Now, what do you think? You think they have rattles or do you think they have knockers? And which do you think this bait would present better? A knocker or a rattle? Right? Well, when do we present jerk baits the most? Right? Here's your pattern. Here's your vibration and frequency. It's a little more subtle, isn't it, than that lipless? But it's rattles nonetheless. Okay? You can see the rattles right there. And you can see up front in the front chamber, I don't know if you can see that or not. So, there you go. 2 knockers. Okay? Rattles in the mid chamber. Nothing back here. Right? Unlike that other bait, they're in their front setting. So you're getting a little bit of both. But the distance in that chamber, see how those big knockers, they don't go any further than where my finger is. And then the rattles are in the middle of the chamber. So when you're twitching it, okay, those 2 knockers are knocking against each other as well as knocking in the chamber. Again, spawn killer color pattern, vision 110 plus 1 from Megabass. Okay, just showing you that as a difference because other baits have rattles and knockers and complements as well. And so you just want to make sure that you're prepared for that and understand. Now you've also got a situation where silent baits. Okay, there is an application for silent baits in certain scenario windows, okay? And that is just, in my opinion, now some of us debate about this, so it depends on which camp you're in, okay? But right after the spring, okay? Right after the spring, basically just feed up. They're used to hearing everything. All these noisy baits, a chatter bait, jackhammer chatterbait, vibration. They're used to hearing at lipless crankbait rattles. They're used to hearing crankbait knockers, right? Right as you get to that apex top of springtime, that's when you should change to a silent, no rattle, no knocker crankbait. Because they're used to all that noise by then. So they're looking, they come across that crankbait, it's going to pique their interest, okay? Because it's not going to say danger. It's not going to say, fear's not going to hit. It's going to be like, oh, okay. The lateral line gets hit. They find it, but there's no noise. There's no okay, the signal, there's no signal. And so, but it still draws them because it doesn't have what they've been conditioned to throughout the spring of hearing and seeing, and maybe they've been caught before in the spring, right? So really, what should you choose? Choose between the rattles for searching fish or the 1 knocker. It really depends on where you at in your fishing regimen. On that particular, are you searching for bass or are you honing in on a specific school or location where you've already caught bass? That's kind of like the rule of thumb. Like murky water, rule of thumb, loud, bold colors. Loud, loud, loud. Rattles and knockers or rattles, but silent baits are not going to get it done in murky water, okay? Because you lose all the elements there. When you're throwing it in good and nice water during that high springtime where they're used to all the noise and all that stuff, they see it, okay? In murky water, they're not going to see it. They're only going to hear it. It's all going to come off their lateral line, and that's what's going to draw them into locating it. And that's why your strikes are always kind of different. They don't always get it exactly right? Because it's not a visual bite, okay? So just think about that from that perspective. 1 knocker makes it easier for bass to tune in and tone in to the specific knocker, okay? Because of that frequency, okay? Again, it's lower, It's not as high octave as say the Rattles are, along with like trolling motors and boats and jet skis and everything, boom, everything going on the top of the water at your lake or reservoir, right? This is why sometimes those knockers get slept on. Those deeper diver knockers get slept on, and they shouldn't be, because they do provide a reliable signal that the bass can hear consistently, and so it's just something like that. Your BB Rattles obviously are your drawing power, right? They're going to pull fish from further away than what a knocker is going to be, like we said, and they help you locate, help you locate the fish, obviously. So when you're choosing that, you got to choose. I always recommend having both. Have some crazy sounding, heavy old school lipless crankbaits with a ton of rattles. And then have some that are half, the noise is half, okay? You just really have to figure out what they're looking for, right? Once you find them in terms of that. Like the T70, the TN70 from Jackals has got a disc knocker version. The Lucky Craft 1.5s have like the rattling sound, more like the Rattles. Can't go wrong with a rattle trap, old school Bill Lewis rattle trap. High pitch rattle blast. I mean, full blast, right? LV 500s from Lucky Craft. A lot of people sleep on those. That's a standard version. Don't. Like, I mean, a lot of people, I know they're not as sexy as like Megabass and Depths and some of the other, Raids, new crankbait, crankbait line, the Level Crank, the Gorilla, and all that stuff. They're just really effective. They just, a lot of people still sleep on them. But the one knocker's your change up. I think you should start with your rattle, okay, especially in spring, and then use the one knocker for kind of a change up. That would be my recommendation, because you want to draw these fish, especially if you're out there without any electronics and you're not finding them, and you're casting blind, okay, but you're reading the fish, you're reading the river system. You know that the fish should be there. There's an eddy there. There's a seam there, okay. You know where they should be, but you still need to locate them. Okay, and that's where the rattles come in. And so again, multiple small beaded BB rattles often are with a smaller internal chamber, like I said, often provide a higher pitch. Okay, so keep that in mind when you're out there. High pitched, loud clacking. That's really what you want. And when you're out there, and then one knocker is typically a single bead ball. Okay. Tungsten, typically now, but before, not tungsten. But it may also now be more of a disc style, okay? Not necessarily like a round ball, like a round head jig, you know what I mean? It's not necessarily like that anymore. Lower pitch, thump and thud. That's it, guys. That's the signal. Let me throw in a really interesting thing in the mix here, because this is what's happening with the fishing world, with innovations and stuff. Here's a rattling rig. Okay, you guys all fishing the koi keys. You guys all fishing all that stuff right now, right? The latest and greatest crazes in soft plastics and finesse fishing, the koi key, full cast, okay, or the koi key fish, right? Well, here's VMC hook. Here's a rattling Jika rig from Drop Zone. Again, rattles. Okay, in the drop shot weight. There's your rattles. Okay. So it's signaling further down in the water column. It's signaling, okay, with those rattles attracting and pulling bass to it, to that crazy sea urchin style bait, right, that everybody's raving about these days. Latest and greatest for now until the next one pops along. But that's what people are using, and you should be using with that bait is something with a rattle. I know some people are using trebles, or there's some new nail weights coming out, but the nail weights don't have rattles, so you need to do a combination of something if you want to provide a rattle, something to entice and draw to that koi key, okay? Otherwise, the koi key is simply a silent bait, okay? Because casting it out, there's nothing other than visual to draw anyone, and so they have to see it to turn on it. There's nothing going towards the rattle line like it would if you had a Chica rig. All right, guys, that's it. I appreciate you. This is this edition of the Masterclass on signal and noise, part of the crankbait series. I hope this helps. If you have any questions about any of these baits, I'll go through them really quick. That is a Tiger crankbait, S-Crank. Tiger crankbait. Killer Greg's Blue Crab. Very, very, very successful bait on the water. That was in the old Excalibur. You probably find that out. Probably find that. You know, can't find that in the stores anymore. That brand was bought and I think shut down. Hard Turn. Awesome, awesome crankbaits as well. Pop Max KO. Can't go wrong with the old Trappa. Okay. Jackal style. Lipless. Okay. Another lipless style. The beads are up front in that. And then, obviously, a Pop Max from Megabass. Emerald Arachi. Beautiful bait. And then a 110 plus 1 Vision 110 plus 1 jerkbait spawn killer pattern. I love this. This is my favorite pattern. Spawn killer pattern, especially in the springtime. Cannot go wrong with this. From Megabass. Appreciate you guys. Please like and subscribe to the channel here, as well as subscribe to the free newsletter. It's free. Can't get wrong. Any kind of information that you can get out of that, you can apply out on the water. We'll do some on-the-water stuff when the new boat arrives for our river systems. I'm really, really looking forward to that. And then we'll take some people out on that as well that are subscribers and followers of the channel, as well as subscribers to the newsletter. And get them out, put them on some fish. That's what it's about, locating, put them out on some fish, teach them some new techniques. So when they go out there, they can go out there and slam them and hopefully get their PB. All right, guys.